like I'm crazy. There was really only so much time I could get away with calling those winter decorations. Hi everyone, welcome back to What's Sewing On. Today I'm going to be doing my first attempt at Regency stays. I've been wanting to do these stays for a very long time, but I've been so intimidated by the pattern. I've been so intimidated to actually do it. But I have a project coming up where I'm going to need some, so today is the day I'm going to actually just jump in and do it. If you've ever watched my channel before, you know that I've never actually made a mock-up of anything I've done before, which is terrible. But because there is so many new techniques in making these stays, I decided that I'm only going to be making a mock-up for this version, but I need it to be wearable. I need it to give me the shape. I need it to give me that Regency look. So I don't really care how pretty the finished look is, but I need it to do the job it needs to do. I was looking around online and I think the time frame I need is between 1805 and 1810. So I found Laughing Moon 115 Traditional Ladies Regency Corset. Got it. This pattern has a chemise, short stays, and long stays. So I'm actually taking some liberties here and pretending that she was wearing a short stay. Obviously, I don't really know what she was wearing underneath, but I feel like this character probably wouldn't have been wearing short stays, but you never know. So I'm taking some liberties and I'm actually just going to do the short stays, basically for myself, because I know the long stays has a lot more work to it. And I think for my very first one, a short stays option for a wearable mock-up will be perfect. All of the materials for this project are thrifted, which is so amazing. I know you're supposed to be using a broadcloth for the top fabric. I'm going to be using a lighter fabric. It's still a weave, it's a cotton blend, it's white. I think it will do the trick. Obviously, it's not going to give the same structure as a broadcloth, but I think it will be fine for a mock-up. And then the lining material, I'm going to be using a cream sateen. The other materials you need is basically cording, some boning, which I got for Christmas, and they say for a bust plate you can just use a paint stick, so I have one of those. So I know there is a ton of little details to do and new techniques in this project, so I'm honestly just going to jump right in. I'm going to trace out my pattern pieces and then start cutting. That was a lot of prep work. So after cutting them all out, you have to go around all the outside edges of every single individual piece because you are handling a lot and that's going to stop it from fraying. But there are a lot of pieces and they're small. And then you also have the lining and the fabric. I haven't even finished the first page yet. I'm so scared. So before I start, I just wanted to say something really quick about the pattern. I'm really happy that I went to a print shop to have it printed out, because when I was trying at first to print from home, it was really confusing. As my first time ever printing a PDF from home, I wasn't able to find it, but if they had just like, you know, for the traditional Regency ladies corset, if they would just say print pages 14 to 12. Or like, you know, so then you could actually just know what pages you have to print. I think that would be really helpful. But I did notice two issues with the pattern. And I know this first one isn't the biggest deal in the world, but it's more for like consistency's sake. Some of the pattern pieces were marked traditional ladies Regency corset, where others were marked ladies traditional Regency corset. So it's the same thing, I'm assuming, but it did give me pause because I wasn't sure if maybe it was a different pattern piece and I was making a mistake. So just having those titles the same would have been very helpful. And also one of the pattern pieces was mismarked with the sizing, so that was a bit confusing. Hello. So I've got all the pieces done. I've stitched all around all of the pieces. I've also slashed the gussets in the bust, and I've hard pressed them, and I don't know who's more hard pressed, me or them gussets. But no, so now I just have to actually attach the gusset triangles to these slash lines. I thought the cording was going to be the longest part. Now I'm terrified how long the cording is going to take me. Can you do it for me? Can you do the cording for me? No? Okay. Fine. Moral support then. Now I have to stitch the gussets to the slash line, right sides together, with a 1/4 inch seam allowance from the top to roughly 1 inch from the bottom. Do you want to do this? Would you like a doggy corset? Do you want to go outside? So I'm going to let him out. Then I have to stitch the gussets to the slash line and then press it and then top stitch everything.
Oh, cool. Go, 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 go. No doubt, no doubt, no doubt.
Okay. Stitching time. Why am I terrified? Day 2. I didn't even try today because I feel like today is going to be a lot of couch sitting because I'm going to be cording. So might as well be comfy. This beast will be going up soon. Super cozy. So last night before I finished, I wanted to make sure that I got all of my gussets done, which I did. And then I was going to call it a night, but I thought, why don't you do something for yourself and actually trace all the cording lines onto all the pieces so you don't have to do it tomorrow. Which was super smart, and I'm really glad I did it because now I can just basically start stitching as soon as I'm finished here. Last night I finished all of the gussets. I did have a hard time with it. 2 reasons. One, I know that I'm not using the right material for the outside fabric. I am using a pretty flimsy material. I actually double lined the material. So the outside fabric is actually, I cut all the pieces out twice. I sewed them all together. So it is thicker than it would be if I didn't, and the lining is just the 1 layer. I didn't really understand the directions that much. It didn't really make sense to me, and I'll tell you why. So it just says stitch the gussets to the slash line, right sides together. So to me, that's, you know, the fabric, this is the right side, gusset, right side, together, stitch around it, obviously leaving the bottom open. They are hard pressed, so technically it will still look nice from the outside, but you'll see that stitch line. And then the next step is to do a top stitch all around it. So again, you'll see the double top stitch, and I'm not sure if that's what it's supposed to look like, but to me, I thought just the 1 top stitch is probably what you want to do. So what I did, I took the stitch line that had been pressed over and I kind of unpressed it, and I stitched that to the outside of the gusset, and then I flipped it around and then did that on the other side too. So basically it was stitched just to the hard press line, and then I just pulled the tail in of the gusset, so then it gave that clean edge on the outside, but you couldn't see any of the stitch lines. And then I pressed it all flat again, and then I did a top stitch all around the outside of the gusset into the hard press line and basically the other side of the fabric too, and put that all together. Now it's not as clean looking, obviously, on the inside as I would like. I'm not sure if that's the right way to do it, but it did give the look that I was going for of only the 1 stitch instead of the 2 stitch lines. Again, maybe this is the way you're supposed to do it and I just wasn't reading the directions right, but I did it this way, and it is just a mock-up, so I have to remember it doesn't have to be perfect. So they're in, and the bottom obviously looks a bit messy. Still looks messy, but they said don't worry about that because you're going to be doing some flossing after to reinforce those stitch lines, so you won't even be able to see the bottom of the gusset. So I can probably make it look nicer once I do that. My other issue I ran into, and I know I did this and I should have thought of it yesterday and I didn't. When I had all of the big pattern pieces out and I was tracing over top of them, I did all the tracing first. And then I put away the pattern pieces, I cut out my pieces, and then I just started cutting. I should have, once I finished cutting, I should have measured them on top of all the pattern pieces to make sure that they were accurate. I don't know why I forgot this, but I did, and I will remember from now on because I think all of the main pattern pieces are right. But I did something while cutting the lining, and I don't know if it was just because maybe I rushed or maybe I wasn't paying attention, but some of the pieces are about ½ inch shorter than the actual fabric. Now I should go and cut new fabric, but again, it's a mock-up. I also don't want to waste more fabric than I already am, so I'm not going to. If it ends up being super bad, it's just a mock-up, so I'll remember for next time. But all of the main pieces on the outside are right, so at least it will look nice on the outside. The inside, there might be some fabric missing, but I can always go through my scraps and sew that on if I really need to afterwards. Again, all things I'm learning for next time, so it's fine. But I mentioned before I finished last night, I decided to trace some of the lines onto my pattern pieces so I can just start stitching today. The pattern actually tells you to use a light box. I don't know anybody with a light box. I don't know. So my plan was to cut out 2 pattern pieces of each and then one, you know, to trace. And then the other one, I was going to go into all the lines and just use my rotary cutter or scissors. And then once I put that on top of the pattern, on top of the fabric, I could just use my pencil to go into those cut lines to make lines onto the fabric. That's what I was going to do. I don't know if that would have worked, but that's what my plan was until I had this brainwave last night. I don't know where it came from, but I have a glass desk. So I just took a flood lamp that I have, put it between my knees under the desk, and then I was able to trace it onto the glass. It worked out perfectly, so I'm super happy that I thought of that. Again, don't know where that came from, so good for me. So that was really easy to be able to trace onto both sides of each pattern piece, and then it was no problem showing through onto the fabric. So I was able to trace out all of my lines. So I have all of my back and side pieces put together. I have all of my lines drawn out on the front and side and back pieces. So now all I'm going to do is attach my lining to my front fabric for the bodice. I'm going to do all of my stitching lines all at once, and then I'm going to do all of my cording all at once. For the cording, they say to use butcher string. I don't know if this is butcher string. I got it while thrifting. It's on a big wooden spool. There's a lot of it here, and I think it is perfect material for it. So I'm just going to use this and an embroidery needle. So once I'm done all my cording, I'm actually going to time myself to see how long it does take if I just do a straight shot of it, to maybe give you an idea. Again, I'm a beginner, I've never done it before, so it might be a lot longer than it would take a normal person, but we'll see how it goes. So once I'm done all of that, I'll come back. I have to do these straps. For the grommets, I'm not going to be using metal grommets just because I have some, but I want to use it on my actual stays when I make the real version. So I don't want to waste those materials. But for the mock-up, I think I'm just going to do a buttonhole stitch all around the holes. It's going to take me a lot longer, but again, I don't want to waste the material. So I'm going to bring all this to the sewing machine, get in all my channels, and then start cording. I finished all the stitching. Holy cheese balls, that was insane. It took an hour and a half just to stitch that straight. And I tried my best to like not do too long of tails, but I don't know if it's just my machine has like a wicked draw. I was holding on to the tails as much as possible as I was stitching in, and it kept slipping through my fingers and then going through the needle, so I had to keep rethreading it so many times and rethread, and it was just so brutal. I think my machine and Farley heard me say a lot of things I've never said around them before. Oh my gosh, it was brutal. And like, holy, people actually hand stitch this. And another tip, which is pretty much common knowledge, is cut your tails pretty much every single time you start a new line. When I was doing one of them, I left it for like 2 or 3 and I flipped it over. And on the one side, I kept moving all the threads, so I wasn't really worried about them. And then I flipped it over and I still have to go around and clip all the edges. I'm going to go and press it now, and then I'm going to start cording. I really don't think I'm going to be as far along as I thought I was going to be. I think it's going to take probably the rest of tonight to cord all this, so then tomorrow I'll have to come back and do the straps. I'm going to try to do the buttonholes tonight as well. Probably off camera because that's pretty boring and it's just buttonholes. Whew, this is a lot of work for something that is so small. And it's worn underneath stuff, so you're not even gonna see it. Jeez. So I was able to finish all of my channeling and all of the eyelets last night. Thankfully, there's still so much work to do today, but I know I'm going to finish it today because I basically have to. I didn't take any video of me cording because honestly it was just me hunched over passing a needle through the channels, so it wasn't really that interesting. The only kind of tips and things that I could say is make sure that you are pressing it and it is a really flat surface as you're passing the needle through. I also found just having it on the arm of the sofa I was on made it a lot easier to go through, and I wasn't poking through the front and the back. And honestly, just flipping your fabric back and forth, making sure that you haven't poked out anywhere. There was one point that I was kind of rage cording because there is just one section on the front that a few of the channels are less than an inch long, and I'm just like, why? Also, always make sure that you did thread your needle before you pass through a channel, because I did that a few times, pulled out the needle and there was nothing on the other end. And if you do end up poking your finger, make sure you're not bleeding, because that happened too. I was able to get it out with peroxide, but just watch out. But all in all, the cording took me about 2 hours and 20 minutes. And the eyelets probably took me 1 hour and 40 minutes, 1 hour and 30 minutes, which is a really long time. And I don't think it would have actually been that long, but I was watching Nathan Drake run through Nepal, so I wasn't really focusing on this completely. And I probably could have got it done a lot quicker had I just paid attention just to the eyelets. But I'm really happy with the way it looks so far. Next step, I'm going to go around and cut all of the cording. I'm also going to give it a really, really good press before I start the next step. Once that's done, I'm going to attach the front corset to the back corset, try it on, will be the moment of truth. And then you attach the straps to the back, and then it's all the binding. So all of the edges have to be bound with bias tape. I actually don't have any bias tape. The only thing I have is, I don't even know what it is, but I got this thrifting in the spring, so it's just been sitting around, and I think it's the perfect length. It's honestly thin material, so I don't think it's going to be too thick for it. In the instructions, they say that you can bind it with leather, so I'm pretty sure this flimsy material isn't going to be too thick for me to work with. And then after that, I think I have to put in maybe 4 more eyelets for the straps, which doesn't seem bad at all after doing 14. And then you are supposed to floss your gussets. I honestly don't know if I will get to that. I will do it eventually. So I have a lot to do. I'm gonna start off by just going to trim all of this, press it, and then I'm gonna put it together.
When I was a kid at school learning the golden rule, teacher often used to say, if you don't tell a lie, there's not a reason why you can't be like Washington someday. No one knows how hard I tried to follow teacher's plan. I did it till the day that I became a man.
Does anyone ever get to drink warm coffee? So they're looking like stays, I think. Straps are on. I kind of tried it on. It fits, but I think it's a wider gap in the back than they're supposed to be. But again, I think cutting my fabric, I must have done something wrong. So again, that's something I can fix for the next time. So before I put in my boning, I think I'm going to do one final press, put in the boning, and start the bias tape.
Married man, I never tell a went to town, I thought I'd chop it down, just like Mrs. Washington's dear boy. When he came back home that night and missed the cherry tree, I said I did it, and he licked the stuffing out of me. Yet Georgie got away with it, as easy as could be. How did Georgie?
Hands are cold.
I'm freaking cold. Well, that was a treat. Wow, the appreciation I have for people who make these for a living or just make them on the regular for themselves. Wow, you deserve a medal. This was a lot of work, and I knew it was going to be a lot of work, so I'm not surprised at all. I am surprised at the fact how much I loved making it. Growing up, I absolutely loved Lego. I loved puzzles. And to me, sewing is very much like that because you're starting with pieces and you're putting them together to make something new. So when I started sewing, I kind of associated that, and I realized that's why I probably like it so much. And for me, this stay was very much like a puzzle because there are so many small pieces. You're putting them together and the way you're fitting it to give it structure, it was just very much like that. And I think that's why I enjoyed it so much. Obviously, like the learning and the skills and all that stuff too, but I really liked the puzzle kind of aspect of this. Are they beautiful? No, but they're a wearable mock-up, and honestly, they do exactly what I wanted them to do. In the reveal, I wore it underneath my Jane Bennett dress that I made months ago, and I think I'll have to check in editing, but I think it really gave a different silhouette, which is obviously what I was lacking whenever I made that initial video. I don't even want to get started on that. Putting on one of your very first costumes and seeing how terrible it was and how proud I was of it. That is definitely a punch in the gut. Obviously, there's a lot of things that I have to refine when I do it for the actual version, but I'm super happy with it. Like, I've never done gussets before. I never have done channeling or cording like this. I've never used bias tape before. I've had very minimal experience with boning, and I've never done eyelets before. So pretty much all of this project, other than sewing a straight line, which I see now that, man, apparently I don't do that very well either. Oh, was I drunk for some of these? I did have a little bit of an issue with the front bust bias. In the instructions, it does say that you should switch to a wider tape. I thought this would be fine. It absolutely wasn't. But then I was honestly running out of time and I had to finish it. So I just ended up doing what I could with the gathers. So I know I could have actually made them look a lot nicer. And next time for sure, I will use my own bias tape or at least a wider version of bias tape, because this worked for all around the arms. It worked for the back, but it definitely didn't work for the front bust. I also really love my bust plate. I couldn't find a paint stick in my house that I hadn't used, so I just repainted it white, and then as I went, I was like, how cute would it be to put some little flowers on it? Obviously with a broadcloth, you probably wouldn't see it at all, especially if there was a pattern on it, but I knew my material, you could probably see through it, so I just thought it would be a cute little detail, and I feel like if I was in the Regency era, I would start my own business doing this, because this is adorable, and even if you couldn't see it, you could have so many different kinds to wear on your bust plate. Obviously for the higher class that could afford silly things like this, but I thought it was a cute touch. As I mentioned, I did run out of time. I did start trying to do the flossing last night, and I finished one, and honestly, I didn't like the look of it at all. I think it's something I'm going to have to practice on a separate piece a little bit, because embroidery hasn't been something I've done much of. But that's also why I really like this stay, is because for the future, whenever I am doing a real version of something, I can always come back to this stay and practice some of the stitching directly on this, because it is a mock-up. And I don't really care what it's going to look like. Even though it's not beautiful, it's my beautiful mess. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like, and I hope you subscribe. I will see everybody in my next video. No? You called my bluff. I wasn't actually gonna touch your nose. It's so wet. Holy birds. Blue jay and a crow are just going at it. Okay. There's like a turf war going on out there. There's been a murder. Because it's a bunch of crows. Jeez. Tough crowd. Yeah, I know. I'll let you out in a second. Let me just finish what I was about to say. I wented. My goodness. Do you think I can get some talking in while I'm petting you? Will you be okay with that?